Hello, I'm Vivienne Janse van Rensburg, and today I'll be talking on harpists playing in the orchestra and the preparation that actually needs to go behind that. So one of the first things I'd like to touch on is one of the most important things and something you should never leave to the last minute or think you can get away with, and that is tuning. You have to tune your instrument like you've never tuned it when you're playing with the orchestra. You have to remember that the other instruments can change their tuning slightly as they play, so if they hear they are off, they are going to adjust. If you are off in the middle of a concert, there is nothing you can do. So beforehand, you need to tune your harp once, if not twice, if possible. Another thing about tuning, and there's a lot of different methods to go about this. Few harpists will do different things, and I will tell you about those things in terms of what pitch you are actually tuning to. For instance, if the orchestra is tuning to 442, I preferably like to tune to 443 to compensate for that gradual sharpen of the orchestra as the concert goes on. That's not to say that that is the right and only way. The one thing I will say that I always do is speak to my conductor before the first rehearsal and ask him, do you have a preference on how the harp gets tuned? Do you prefer it to be with the orchestra, lower than the orchestra, or higher than the orchestra? He might tell you he prefers for you to be on pitch with the orchestra or a little bit higher or lower. Or they might tell you it's totally up to you and you must do what you think is best. In those scenarios, you are not just then working with yourself. If you are working with another harpist, you need to correspond with that harpist. You cannot be tuning to two different pitches. In the instance where you are the principal harpist, you get to make that executive decision. Tell your second or third harpist, we are tuning to 442. If you are the second or third harpist, you then need to take the cue from your principal and you ask her or him, what are you tuning to? And that is exactly what you tune to. When it comes to tuning, you cannot arrive to a rehearsal 15 minutes before it starts and expect to tune thoroughly while the rest of the orchestra is warming up their instruments. You need to arrive half an hour to 45 minutes before at the very least so that you can tune in absolute silence. When you are tuning the harp, make sure you are tuning every single string, even if you are not playing it. And this is just a general thing. If you are not tuning every single string on your harp, you're affecting the tension of the soundboard, which as a harpist you will know is very temperamental, and we need to protect that tension and protect that soundboard from damaging itself. So tune every single string. One thing you need to note when tuning your harp is that you do get a slightly different tonation and pitch when tuning with your second finger and tuning with your thumb. It's very easy and it's comfortable for a harpist when tuning the higher register to switch to the thumb. Don't do that. Keep it consistent with your second finger. Even your third and fourth are giving similar tonation and pitch to your second finger, but because the thumb is such a different plucking method, it is going to be slightly off pitch, and you can even test this yourself when you are tuning your instrument. Play the same note with your second finger, then play it with your thumb, and you'll see the pitch vary slightly, ever so slightly. But like I said, with orchestral work, you want to be as accurate as possible. So tune for the majority of your fingers. So you are playing more with your second, third, and fourth finger. So tune with your second finger consistently, or third and fourth maybe when you get to the lower strings. Remember when you are playing orchestra work to prep yourself extra in terms of what you are bringing with to the rehearsal. So on the topic of tuning, make sure you always have a tuning key, have an orchestra bag with a tuning key, have a normal handbag with a tuning key, and even put an extra tuning key in your car. I myself have been caught in a situation where I went to go play with an orchestra for the first time, where they had a harp available for me to play at, and I didn't bring a tuning key because I assumed there would be a tuning key with the harp. There was not, and the first rehearsal was really a nightmare. We had to courier a tuning key to where I was. It wasn't in my normal location. Luckily, we could get the tuning key before the next rehearsal, but it's really not a situation you want to be in. A harp sounding out of tune in a rehearsal makes you look unprepared, makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. So always keep those extra tuning keys around. Another thing you need to come prepared with is extra strings. Even if you are playing on another venue's harp, you don't know what they have prepped with the harp. Make sure you have extra strings available, as we all know strings snap at any given time. So what do you do if you have a string that breaks just before you have an orchestra concert or before you start rehearsals? It's difficult, it's tough, and it's not going to be easy, but it has happened to many harpists before, and it's something you can overcome. So first things first, you obviously change that string as soon as possible. Then you need to stretch that string out to try get it to settle. So what do I mean by that? As soon as you've put the string on, you are literally pulling on that string and getting that tension going, getting it to really play out, and keep tuning it up again. Also, when you are pulling the tension of the string, if you're on a pedal harp, pull the tension in each pedal slot. So in flat position, in natural position, as well as sharp position, and this will help you get to a more settled sound much quicker. In those situations, don't be afraid to tune in between movements or in between pieces. Obviously, don't do it loudly. Just use your ear for a very, very light tune that no one can hear, but you need to keep that string in tune. As I've said, you do not want to be the harpist that sounds out of tune. In terms of other things you bring along with you to rehearsal, always a pencil, and that's for any orchestral musician. You are going to be making markings throughout the rehearsal, and the conductor is going to be asking you to do a few things differently. You need to be able to write that in. Another thing with harpists, we have a lot of tacit bars or even tacit movements where we are doing nothing. Rehearsals for orchestra are often hours and hours on end. Don't put your body on extra strain by trying to sit in your chair with no backrest for hours when you are not playing. Always try to organize, if the space allows it, for a chair with a backrest to put next to your harp stool, so that when you have these tacit movements or tacit bars that go on for minutes and minutes and the conductor keeps rehearsing that tacit section, you're actually saving your back a little bit by having a bit of a backrest next to you. But again, you need to still pay attention to what's happening in the rehearsal. You don't want to be the harpist who's caught in the wind and has no idea where they are coming in. And that brings me to my next point in terms of preparation for orchestral work. Think about it in terms of the staves you are playing and the number of notes you are playing compared to the other instruments. Even though you might only be playing 20 out of 300 bars, in those instances, you need to prepare even more so, because you need to know where you come in after these tacit movements and these tacit bars. So what I highly suggest is you need to source the music. Ask the orchestra you're playing with. If you can't get it from them, there are many harp forums on Facebook that I have used that have been extremely helpful in terms of other harpists giving you copies of their music if they know that you are going to get the music from your orchestra eventually. So as I mentioned, about a month before your rehearsal starts, you need to have the music in your hands, also to ensure that you can get your markings in. You don't want to be going to a rehearsal for the first time. You don't know what your pedalings are, you don't know what your fingerings are, and you end up just looking really unprepared. So when you get your music, it's not just about practicing through the parts that you do play in. What I like to do when I first get my music, before I've even looked at playing it, I sit with my music and I find a recording of the orchestral piece, and I go from the beginning, even those tacit movements. And I can't stress this enough. It's so important in all these tacit bars that you know exactly where you come in. It's not always possible to count, especially when there's 260 bars to count before you come in. While you should be counting consistently, another backup you can do is by putting in markings of cues of other instruments. So what I like to do, I sit and I listen with the music, and I hear a wonderful brass entrance, and I write there, brass comes in, or the flute comes in, or there's a violin solo. So also in rehearsal, that helps you, because you will be stopping and starting in those first rehearsals. And then in those tacit movements where you play nothing and the orchestra keeps stopping and starting and picking up from different bars, you are not always going to be able to follow. But if you have your cues, you'll be able to go, now I know where I am. So that is extremely important. When you are playing with the recording as well, or reading through your music with the recording, what you should also be doing is making notes of metronome timings. How fast is this section? How fast is the next section? That is not to say that that is going to be the one and only speed. Each conductor likes to do things a little differently and will have their own interpretation of the musicality, but at least you're on some sort of par, and then adjusting by a few metronome notches is a lot easier than you assuming a tempo, you get to rehearsal and it's actually double the speed. So get your metronome markings in, specifically for the sections that you are playing in, so that when you are practicing exactly to a metronome. Orchestral practicing needs to be so precise. You are not a soloist here, and you are often the only one in your section. Even in the orchestras where they employ 2 or 3 harps, especially in South African orchestras where we are limited with funds, especially in this COVID time, they are often only going to employ a second harpist when that second harpist has a different piece of music than the first harpist. So essentially, even though you're playing with another harpist, you are still your own section. You are the only one playing those notes. So if something goes wrong, all eyes point to you. You don't have another 5 instruments to follow with in the section. So you need to know your music extremely well. One thing about being a new or young orchestral harpist, perhaps you've never played with an orchestra and it's something you want to do but you're very nervous. Totally normal to feel that way. I was extremely nervous for my first couple of youth orchestras and really struggled to find my confidence, and that only comes with time and experience. But one thing I encourage all harpists to do is network with other harpists. I myself am a young orchestra member, and one thing that has given me a lot of strength and confidence is being able to look up to mentors. There are so many really experienced, qualified harpists in South Africa. I'd like to make a tribute to Ventura Rosenthal, who sadly died last year, but had so much to give to the South African harp community. And her orchestral experience really goes above and beyond so many harpists in this country. Currently, I get my mentorship from Galen Sales, who is now the principal harpist of the JPO, and without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. So as a young harpist, look to your older harpists, and I can guarantee you the harp community is very welcoming, and we all want to help each other out. So get advice, get lessons, get help from those other harpists. I'm lucky enough to have all of Ventura's old orchestral music. With that comes all of her wonderful markings. And she has played these orchestral pieces time and time again. So the markings she had were absolutely incredible. If you find yourself playing with an orchestra, contact us or contact another harpist and ask for markings. Ask for help on what to do. Because other harpists with time learn the things and the little cues that they need to pick up on in order to be the best version of themselves in an orchestra. You as a harpist in an orchestra are faced with a few challenges that the other instruments may not be faced with. One very big one is you are naturally a softer instrument than a violin or a flute or the brass or percussion or any kind of string instrument, and you are on your own. You don't have other instruments backing you up, or you may have 2 harpists, maybe 3 harpists. You may be lucky enough to play with 5 or 6 harpists, but those kind of orchestra pieces really do come once in a lifetime, especially in South Africa. So when you are playing in an orchestra, you need to really consider your volume, but at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice the quality and the values of your instrument by overplaying and overstraining yourself. So here is where you need to be really comfortable with your technique. You need to be practicing at home in ways where you know you can get a really loud sound without tensing, without causing other issues. The statement I'm about to make, I hope I don't get too much backlash from conductors, but not every conductor is always going to give you a clear beat. Some of them are really feeling the musicality more so than trying to guide you on the beat. And that is also different for each level of what an orchestra can produce. In professional orchestras, you kind of do expect that your orchestra knows the timing, knows the beat, and the conductor can really play with the musicality of the piece. So you're not always going to get a clear beat. In those instances, you need to be listening so well to your fellow orchestra members. You need to not be the one that sticks out. You need to blend in. Harpists are very used to solo playing, but in orchestra work, you really need to focus on your listening skills and playing with other musicians. And this will also help you in your chamber and ensemble work, which is a great tool to practice before you step into an orchestra. If you're a new harpist wanting to play in the orchestra, I would suggest trying out ensemble and chamber work beforehand. It will teach you to get comfortable with other instruments and get comfortable with timing of things. You also have to take into account that the way the harp is played is very different to how other instruments are played. we almost have a delayed beat because we have to prep and we have to pluck. Whereas other instruments, bowing instruments, wind instruments, are getting on their beat a lot faster than we can. So that's something you need to get used to. Metronome practice is a fabulous thing for this. I know a lot of us dread this, but I think metronome practice is advice I can give you for any kind of playing. Solo playing, chamber playing, ensemble playing, orchestral playing. It will do you nothing but good. You can always ease off on the musicality and get more into your musicality once you've got your structure in place. But it's so important in an orchestra to know where your beat comes in, know how to get to your beat, and know how to follow. A lot of orchestral music will have you playing these beautiful roles, as harp music is very noted for and very style specific. You have a lot of roles. You need to figure out, are you starting your roll on the beat or are you ending the top note on the beat? Do you have to start the roll before the beat comes in? This is also a time where you can communicate with your conductor. Each conductor, like I said, has a different style and different intentions for the music that they are producing to the audience. Your conductor is your captain. You need to be in contact with him all the time and communicate with him all the time. If you are unsure if your chords should be blocked or rolled or arpeggiated, you need to ask your conductor. Don't take the initiative to do what you want. You need to communicate with your conductor and find out the type of intention he's going for, and they will guide you a lot in these kind of situations. I hope this has given some insight to harpists as well as non-harpists about the challenges we have to face and overcome when playing with an orchestra. And I hope this has given new and young harpists a bit of inspiration to play and get themselves involved in ensemble as well as orchestral work. There are plenty of youth orchestras that are desperate for harp players, and we need up-and-coming harpists for the professional orchestras. There are a lot of orchestras out there, and there's a lot of experience you can get and a lot of opportunity you can get from playing in an orchestra. Thank you.